A man convicted of murdering two people in a Superior bar was sentenced to more than 100 years in prison today. A jury convicted Kraig Benson last year of 2 counts of deliberate homicide for shooting his wife and a bartender to death at the Four Aces bar. Jenny Benson and Logan Gardner were killed in the attack in August of 2023.
Superior, Montana, where life moves at a steady rhythm and everyone believes they know the people around them. But on August 27, 2023, the Four Aces bar became a site of unimaginable horror, a night that would change everything. Kraig Walter Benson walked into that bar as a husband and left as a killer. Within minutes, his wife Jenny Benson lay lifeless on the floor, and Logan Gardner, a beloved bartender, had been gunned down in a desperate attempt to escape. 2 lives lost, 1 man responsible. What makes this story so haunting isn't just the violence, but the question that remains unanswered. Why? Surveillance cameras captured the moment Kraig calmly smoked a cigarette, retrieved a gun, and walked back inside to commit an act that no one could have seen coming. What was said at that table? What drove him to pull the trigger? Not once, but over and over again. In a town where trust was a given, this tragedy left betrayal, grief, and shock in its wake. Today, we uncover the chilling truth behind the murders that shattered a community and ask the question everyone is still struggling to answer. What really happened inside the Four Aces bar that night?
Please support us by subscribing to this channel. Hit the notification bell icon so you won't miss our latest videos.
Superior, Montana, a town of fewer than 1,000 people, nestled in the shadow of towering pines and surrounded by rivers that seem to whisper stories of a simpler life. It's the kind of place where everyone waves as they pass, where secrets are rare and trust is the unspoken currency that binds the community together. At the center of it all was the Four Aces bar, a cornerstone of Superior's social life. By day, it was a quiet spot where locals gathered for lunch or a quick drink. By night, it transformed a lively hub of conversation, laughter, and shared stories. For some, it was a routine stop after work. For others, a place to mark milestones or unwind with friends. To the people of Superior, the Four Aces wasn't just a bar, it was a shared space, a symbol of connection in a town where everyone knew everyone else's name, their family, and likely their stories. On any given night, the bar pulsed with life. A bartender behind the counter pouring drinks, familiar faces chatting in their usual seats, and the occasional outsider welcomed with a smile. But for all its familiarity, no one who walked into the Four Aces that night could have foreseen what was coming. What began as a gathering of friends and neighbors on August 27, 2023, would become a nightmare etched into the memory of the town forever. As the hours ticked by, something shifted. At a small table, Kraig and Jenny Benson sat together. From the outside, they appeared like any other couple, sharing a quiet evening. But beneath the surface, the undercurrents of tension and betrayal churned. What led to the violence that followed? What triggered a quiet husband to unleash unimaginable destruction in the place he had likely frequented many times before? To understand how such horror could unfold in a place so trusted, we must look closer at the man who shattered the peace, the victims who lost everything, and the small town left to grapple with the question no one could answer. How could this happen here? August 27, 2023, a Saturday night like any other at the Four Aces bar. Locals gathered to unwind, share stories, and enjoy the kind of comfort only a small-town bar can provide. Among the crowd were Kraig and Jenny Benson, seated together at a small table near the bar. By all accounts, it seemed like a typical evening for the couple. Nothing outwardly unusual to suggest the tragedy that was about to unfold. As the hours passed, patrons laughed, chatted, and clinked glasses, unaware of the storm quietly building at that small table. Surveillance footage captured Kraig rising from his seat, stepping outside into the cool Montana night. A cigarette was lit, its embers glowing faintly in the dark, as he walked toward his wife's Chevrolet Tahoe parked just outside. Inside the bar, life carried on. Jenny Benson remained seated, her expression calm, unaware that her husband was making a choice that would forever change the lives of everyone in that room. Moments later, Kraig returned, the gun he retrieved from the Tahoe now tucked into his waistband. He walked back to the table where Jenny sat, taking his seat beside her as though nothing had changed. But something had. Within seconds, the quiet evening turned to chaos. Without warning, Kraig reached for the weapon, pulling it from his waistband and firing a single fatal shot at his wife. The room erupted into panic as Jenny fell to the floor. Logan Gardner, the bartender, instinctively tried to flee toward the front door, but Kraig turned the gun on him next. Multiple shots echoed through the bar as Logan collapsed, unable to escape. Kraig, unmoved by the pleas and panic around him, fired again. Another shot at Jenny as she lay lifeless, and several more at Logan to ensure there was no chance of survival. "Sir!" With the gun emptied, Kraig placed it on the bar counter, turned and walked out the door as though nothing had happened. His escape was swift, but the devastation he left behind was absolute. Jenny Benson and Logan Gardner, 2 lives bound to Superior, now bound in tragedy, were gone. In the minutes that followed, the 4 aces fell silent. A space once filled with laughter and camaraderie now held only shock and horror. Those who witnessed the scene could do nothing but try to process what they had just seen, a betrayal of trust and humanity that would haunt them for years to come. But for Kraig, it wasn't over. His journey was just beginning, and the consequences of his actions would soon catch up with him in ways even he could not avoid. The aftermath of the tragedy at the 4 Aces bar unfolded with a sense of urgency and chaos. Calls flooded into 911, frantic voices trying to convey the horror of what had just happened. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, lights flashing as they arrived at a place now eerily silent. Inside, they found Jenny Benson, critically injured but still alive. Paramedics worked quickly, stabilizing her enough to transport her to the nearest hospital. Every second counted, but despite their efforts, Jenny succumbed to her injuries shortly after arriving. In a devastating twist of fate, Logan Gardner was declared dead at the scene, his life cut short in the very place where he had brought so much joy to others. As first responders tended to the victims and law enforcement began securing the scene, one critical question loomed. Where was Kraig Benson? Witnesses described him walking out of the bar, calm and composed after committing the unimaginable. Officers immediately issued an alert, knowing the clock was ticking to prevent him from slipping away. Unbeknownst to them, Kraig had fled in his wife's Chevrolet Tahoe, driving aimlessly through the night. He must have known there was no escape, but still he drove, perhaps running from the magnitude of his actions, perhaps from himself. By early morning, his erratic behavior behind the wheel drew attention. A flat tire on the Tahoe, coupled with swerving across lanes, caught the eye of law enforcement in Missoula County. When they finally stopped the vehicle, Kraig offered no resistance. There was no dramatic confrontation, no attempt to fight or flee further. It was as if he had accepted his fate, though the calm exterior he projected belied the chaos he had unleashed just hours earlier. Back in Superior, news of the arrest brought some relief, but it did little to ease the pain or answer the questions gnawing at the community. Why had this happened? Why had Kraig Benson, a man they thought they knew, done something so incomprehensible? The 4 Aces bar, now cordoned off with yellow crime scene tape, stood as a stark reminder of the violence that had erupted there. Forensic teams worked meticulously, piecing together the events of that night, while the town of Superior began grappling with the devastating reality of what they had lost. The search for answers had begun, but for many the wounds were too fresh, the grief too overwhelming, to find any semblance of closure. When officers stopped Kraig Benson on a quiet stretch of highway in Missoula County, the man behind the wheel bore no signs of panic or fear. His demeanor was eerily calm, detached even, as if he had already resigned himself to the consequences of his actions. Yet his erratic driving, caused by a flat tire on the Tahoe, had drawn attention, making it impossible for him to evade capture. The arrest itself was uneventful. Kraig complied with law enforcement, offering no resistance or explanation for the bloodshed he had caused hours earlier. The contrast between his calm surrender and the carnage he had left behind left officers with an unsettling sense of the man they were dealing with. Months later, the courtroom became the stage for a trial that would grip the small town of Superior and beyond. Kraig Benson, now facing 2 counts of deliberate homicide, appeared before the court. His defense? Amnesia. He claimed to have no recollection of the shootings, asserting that the events of that night were triggered by a heated argument with his wife, Jenny. According to Kraig's testimony, the argument revolved around accusations of infidelity. He alleged that Jenny had told him she intended to leave the bar with Logan Gardner rather than return home with him. He painted a picture of a man overwhelmed by betrayal and blinded by emotion, though many questioned the sincerity of his claims. But the trial wasn't just about Kraig's version of events. Prosecutors introduced a damning series of phone calls Kraig had made from jail. In these recorded conversations, he fixated not on the lives he had taken, but on his grievances. He discussed wanting a paternity test for his daughters, and showed no signs of remorse or acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. These revelations painted a stark picture of a man more concerned with his perceived injustices than the devastating consequences of his actions. The courtroom became a place of raw emotion as victims' families and friends took the stand. Jenny's father, Terry Savage, delivered a powerful statement describing the depth of his loss and his hope that Kraig would live a miserable life behind bars. Jenny's daughters, Paige and Taylor, spoke of the fear and betrayal they now carried. Paige called her father narcissistic and declared his actions unforgivable, while Taylor described how their lives had been shattered by the very person who was supposed to protect them. Logan Gardner's friends and family shared their grief as well. They spoke of a man whose kindness had touched so many lives, a man who had been robbed of his future in an act of senseless violence. Their words filled the courtroom with sorrow, a testament to the lives lost and the enduring pain left behind. As the trial progressed, Kraig's sister, Chris Norton, offered a plea for mercy. She described her brother as a man who had once been admirable, someone whose actions on that night were entirely out of character. But her words did little to sway the courtroom, where the weight of the evidence and the emotional testimonies made it clear that no mercy could undo the damage that had been done. In October 2024, the jury delivered its verdict, guilty on all counts. Months later, in January 2025, Kraig Benson was sentenced to 140 years in prison with no possibility of parole. It was a sentence that ensured he would spend the rest of his life behind bars, a consequence many felt was the only form of justice for the lives he had taken and the devastation he had caused. January 3, 2025. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with anticipation as the judge prepared to deliver Kraig Benson's sentence. The room, silent save for the soft shuffling of papers, was a stark reminder of the lives shattered by his actions. After months of testimony, evidence, and emotional pleas, the moment of reckoning had arrived. The judge's voice was steady, deliberate as he handed down the sentence. 60 years for each count of deliberate homicide, plus an additional 10 years for the use of a firearm in a violent crime. No possibility of parole. It was a sentence that ensured Kraig Benson would die behind bars. For many, it felt like the only appropriate consequence for the horrors he had inflicted. But even as the legal process reached its conclusion, the emotional toll remained raw. Jenny's father, Terry Savage, spoke directly to Kraig during his statement, his words laced with pain and fury. He described the profound void left by his daughter's death and expressed his hope that Kraig would lead a miserable life in prison, a fate he believed was more than deserved. Jenny's daughters, Paige and Taylor, stood before the court, their voices steady despite the overwhelming grief they carried. Paige's words cut through the room like a knife. She called her father narcissistic and said his actions were beyond forgiveness. Taylor, her voice trembling, described the fear that now defined their lives. Their testimonies weren't just about grief. They were a stark declaration of betrayal by the one person who should have protected them. On the other side of the courtroom, Kraig's sister, Chris Norton, fought back tears as she pleaded for leniency. She painted a picture of a man who had once been a pillar of the community, a brother she admired. But her pleas for mercy clashed with the cold reality of Kraig's actions. To the families of Jenny and Logan, her words rang hollow, an attempt to humanize a man whose choices had been anything but humane. The contrast between Kraig's portrayal as a victim and the devastation experienced by the victims' families couldn't have been starker. While Chris sought to frame Kraig's actions as uncharacteristic, the courtroom was reminded of the evidence. His lack of remorse, his fixation on grievances, and his utter disregard for the lives he had taken. As Kraig was escorted out of the courtroom, his expression remained impassive, a stark contrast to the tears and anguish of those left in the wake of his violence. Outside, family members left the courthouse, their faces etched with the weight of loss and justice served. For Jenny's and Logan's loved ones, the sentencing offered a measure of closure but not solace. The absence of their loved ones remained, a void that no prison sentence could ever fill. The Four Aces bar was now a symbol of their absence, a painful reminder of the night that changed everything. The courtroom may have offered justice, but the scars left behind would take far longer to heal. For the community of Superior, this moment marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of a long road toward healing. Long after the courtroom emptied and the headlines faded, the memories of Jenny Benson and Logan Gardner remained vivid in the hearts of those who loved them. Their lives were more than the tragedy that ended them. They were filled with purpose, joy, and connection that left an indelible mark on those around them. Jenny Benson was a woman of quiet strength and unwavering devotion. As a mother, she poured her heart into raising her daughters, Paige and Taylor, instilling in them a love for life and a resilience that mirrored her own. Beyond her role as a parent, Jenny was a skilled businesswoman, thriving as a commercial real estate appraiser and managing her own horse ranch. Her passion for horses was more than a hobby, it was a way of life. She spent countless hours tending to her stables, her bond with the animals reflecting her gentle and nurturing spirit. To those who knew her, Jenny was a beacon of kindness and determination. Her love for her daughters, her dogs, and her horses defined her, creating a life full of meaning and beauty. Her loss left a void that words could never fully capture, but her legacy lived on in the hearts of her family and the memories they cherished. Logan Gardner, on the other hand, was the kind of person who could light up a room with just a smile. As the bartender at the Four Aces bar, Logan wasn't just an employee. He was a friend, a confidant, and the soul of the establishment. He had a way of making everyone feel seen and heard, whether it was through a warm embrace, a quick laugh, or simply knowing the perfect thing to say. Logan's connections to the community ran deep. Friends spoke of his generosity, his ability to bring people together, and the genuine care he showed for everyone he met. For Logan, the bar wasn't just a workplace. It was a place where he could create joy, even in the simplest moments. In the days following the tragedy, tributes to Logan poured in from all corners of the community. A GoFundMe page was set up in his memory, capturing the outpouring of love and the sense of loss felt by so many. Friends described him as selfless, kind, and irreplaceable, a man who left the world a little brighter than he found it. For Jenny and Logan, life wasn't just about what they achieved, it was about the lives they touched along the way. Their absence left a profound silence, but their stories, their love, and their spirit endured. As Superior grappled with the weight of their loss, one thing became clear: Jenny Benson and Logan Gardner would not be forgotten. Their lives were a reminder of the beauty and connection, the strength of community, and the lasting impact of kindness and love. The tragedy at the Four Aces bar left wounds far deeper than the immediate loss of life. In a town as close-knit as Superior, the shockwaves reached every corner, touching lives in ways that words could hardly express. But in the face of such profound grief, the community came together, determined to honor the memory of Jenny Benson and Logan Gardner while supporting those left behind. Fundraising efforts began almost immediately, spearheaded by friends, family, and local organizations. A GoFundMe campaign was launched for the victims' families, quickly surpassing its goal as donations poured in not just from Superior but from across the state and beyond. These funds helped cover funeral expenses, provided support for Jenny's daughters, and served as a testament to the generosity and resilience of a community that refused to let its own face this tragedy alone. Memorial events followed, each one a poignant reminder of the lives lost and the love that endured. Candlelight vigils drew crowds to the Four Aces bar, its walls now bearing the weight of memories both joyous and tragic. Friends shared stories of Logan's infectious laughter and Jenny's quiet strength, their voices breaking under the weight of their loss. The flicker of candle flames illuminated faces etched with grief, yet determined to find solace in unity. But while the community worked to heal, many who witnessed the events of that night continued to struggle. Post-traumatic stress disorder became a painful reality for those who had been in the bar when the shots were fired. The sounds of laughter and camaraderie that once defined the Four Aces were replaced by memories too vivid to forget. The sound of gunfire, the sight of panic, and the crushing realization of what had transpired. Counseling services were organized, offering a lifeline to those grappling with the weight of their memories. Yet, for many, the healing process was slow and deeply personal. Survivors spoke of sleepless nights, flashbacks, and the challenge of returning to a place that once felt like home but now carried the shadow of trauma. Despite these challenges, the community's determination to honor Jenny and Logan's legacy remained steadfast. Their lives inspired acts of kindness and connection, with neighbors looking out for one another in ways both big and small. Events were held in their honor, from horse riding gatherings celebrating Jenny's love for animals to local fundraisers supporting Logan's favorite charities. In time, the scars of that night began to fade, though they would never fully disappear. The story of Jenny and Logan became a reminder of the fragility of life, the strength of community, and the enduring power of love in the face of unimaginable loss. Superior, Montana would never be the same, but through its grief, it found a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment to carry forward the legacies of two lives taken too soon, and to ensure that the bonds of community remained unbroken. The story of Kraig Benson, Jenny Benson, and Logan Gardner is more than a tale of tragedy. It's a chilling reminder of how violence can ripple through a community, leaving scars that may never fully heal. Superior, Montana, a town once defined by its tranquility and tight-knit bonds, now carries the weight of that August night. For the families of Jenny and Logan, the pain of their loss is immeasurable. They live with memories of loved ones stolen too soon, grappling with questions that may never be answered. For the witnesses, the echoes of that night linger, altering the way they see the world and their sense of safety within it. And for the town as a whole, the tragedy at the Four Aces bar has become a permanent chapter in its history, a chapter written in grief but also in resilience. This case serves as a stark reminder of how a single act of violence can shatter lives and communities in an instant, but it also speaks to the enduring strength of those left behind, the families who carry on the legacies of the ones they loved, the community members who rallied together to heal, and the individuals who found the courage to rebuild in the face of unspeakable loss. As we conclude this story, we invite you, our viewers, to reflect on its impact. If you feel moved, leave your thoughts or prayers for the families of Jenny Benson and Logan Gardner in the comments. Share your perspectives on how communities can support one another through tragedy and how we might work together to prevent violence in our own lives. While the pain of loss will never fully fade, stories like this remind us of the power of compassion and the importance of connection. It is in coming together that healing begins, and it is through remembering that legacies endure. Thank you for joining us and exploring this heartbreaking story. Let us carry its lessons forward as we strive to build safer, stronger, and more united communities.